Ah, love. Whether you're a skeptic or a true believer who cries during the vows, weddings bring us together in celebration of family, community, and love. But these days, before the happy couple can even make it down the aisle, COVID-19 is changing our rituals. From forcing canceled travel, to trimming the guest list, and even forcing us to make new rules to minimize risk. In Portugal, new restrictions mean that only 50 guests are allowed at a wedding. And here in Jerusalem, a hospital even allowed a couple to get married on its grounds, so that the groom's father, a COVID patient, could watch the wedding from his room. Ceremonies and parties that were months or years in the making are now changing significantly or being canceled altogether. What does that mean for how we celebrate the most important events in our lives? This is DW's COVID-19 special. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Beardsley in Berlin. Well, be it a wedding or a birthday, everyone likes a good celebration, but no one wants the virus as a guest. And that's why many people are changing their event plans. Yet some do move forward. Here's one community's take on a wedding in the time of Corona.
The joy is infectious among these wedding guests. But no one wants to spoil the occasion with a coronavirus outbreak. Precaution is now part of the production. Authorities have put strict limits on gatherings, and families are having to drastically trim their guest lists.
We were expecting to have a gathering of more than 800 people. But unfortunately, due to this pandemic, due to this COVID-19, our guest list has been shortened to 100 to 150 only.
It will still take an army of cooks to assemble the wasan, an elaborate Kashmiri marriage feast of up to 30 courses. But the wedding business in the rest of region is hurting after a double hit from the security clampdown and now the pandemic. We had hopes that we'd do good business this year, but I've suffered a loss of about 80%. And a pandemic-era wedding means some other updates to old traditions. Waiters decked out in hazmat suits and individual servings. Everything went nicely, but we could not enjoy our food traditionally, eating on a copper platter for four, which dates back 300 years. We still enjoyed the feast, but we missed the traditional way. But some things will never change. The anticipation, the excitement, as two families join together to witness a new family begin.
And I'm joined now by Joanne Davila. She's a professor of clinical psychology at Stony Brook University in New York City. Joanne, it's good to have you on the show. How important are rituals like weddings and birthdays for our lives?
They're extremely important. They really provide us with ways to come together and get support from the people we care about. They support our relationships. They're fun things to do that take us away from the sort of monotony of everyday life. So they can be really, really important for us in our lives.
That's true. These are opportunities for family, wider family, to gather around. Are there opportunities in what we're seeing now, or some creativity for couples trying to have these rituals or trying to have something in place of these rituals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see people doing this kind of stuff already. We see people doing things like drive-by birthdays or, Zoom get-togethers, all of which are really important and really helpful for people. And I think we have to work really hard to appreciate what we can get from these kinds of rituals. If we get really stuck with the idea that there's only one way to celebrate and things won't be good unless we do it that way, then we're going to be disappointed in this pandemic time. So we do have to be creative, and I don't mean creative in the sense of come up with entire new ideas about how we do things, but just really thinking about what it is that we need and what we want to get, and finding ways to get that in smaller ways than we're used to, and appreciating what we can get from those smaller ways.
Do you get the sense that some people are waiting until this is all over? You know, one of those phrases you constantly hear, until they have some of these rituals again, these big birthdays or weddings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody's waiting for those kinds of things. The wedding industry is booking weddings out 2, 3, 4 years in advance. People are sort of putting off the kinds of things that they might normally do in terms of parties and events. And of course, that makes sense. There are many things that people see as special events that they want to celebrate in big ways when they can. And the healthy part of that is it gives us something to look forward to. The potential problem with that is if people sort of put off their lives, can't live their lives, can't feel satisfied in the present with what they have, then they're really going to be struggling even more during this pandemic time, a time when we're already, really our emotions are on edge and we're not feeling like we're getting what we need. So it's good to have something to look forward to, but we also want to be present in our lives now and, celebrate in the way we can celebrate.
When we talk about relationships in general and how they're faring during a time of corona, this seems like an amazing stress test for so many relationships, I'd imagine.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. For some people, they're spending so much more time together. They have so many more responsibilities in terms of childcare, for example, or if two people are working at home, or even if one person's working at home that didn't used to work at home, they have to make accommodations. This is particularly hard for people who don't have the kind of living environment where this is easily done. So there's so many more challenges that couples face these days that make it really hard for them to continue on in the way that they were before.
And I have to ask, do you think it's more difficult for maybe younger couples who are just beginning that relationship together, or for older couples who maybe sort of have an established routine?
Yeah, I don't think it's one or the other necessarily. I think both kinds of couples can have advantages and have some risks as well. So, older couples have the benefit of some stability, a level of commitment. They know each other well. They kind of know what to expect. They may have maybe more tolerant in certain kinds of ways. On the other hand, they don't have access to the kinds of other things that they're usually engaging in to sort of get away from the relationship if they need to. So that can be problematic. Younger couples might be in a stage of, kind of early relationship bliss where this is a time to really just be together and it bonds them. At the same time, if they don't know each other that well, and suddenly they're thrown together in this kind of way, they may start learning stuff about one another that they don't necessarily like. And then what do you do with that now that you're, kind of stuck together in this sort of way? So, yeah.
All right. Joanne Davila from Stony Brook University in New York. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And now it's time for your questions. It's the part of the show where our science correspondent, Derek Williams, answers the questions you've posted to our YouTube channel. Over to Derek.
Does COVID-19 transmission change depending on whether it's humid or if it's hot and dry?
One of the great hopes last winter here in the Northern Hemisphere, back in February and March, that COVID-19 would prove to be seasonal, hasn't really panned out. And in the last months, a lot of researchers have come out with often conflicting messages about when and how environmental factors are influencing the spread of the disease. Any direct links between outdoor temperatures and transmission of the virus seem to still be pretty tenuous to me. But increasingly, researchers are coming to a more united conclusion that humidity, the amount of moisture in the air, could be playing a pretty big role in the spread of SARS-CoV-2, both indoors and out. The evidence is mounting that dry air makes the virus spread more rapidly. One new study out of Australia claims that when relative humidity falls just 1%, COVID-19 cases could rise by 7 to 8%. The explanation on offer is this. Moister air causes the aerosols and droplets that an infected person coughs out to grow larger as they absorb water vapor, which makes them sink to the ground faster. But when the air is dry, the opposite happens. Then the virus-containing droplets shrink as their moisture is absorbed by the surrounding air. That makes them lighter and more likely to drift around at head level and be inhaled by someone else. Another factor that could well be playing a role when the air is dry is that it also dries out your nasal passages. And they're your first line of defense against airborne pathogens like SARS-CoV-2. When they dry up, it also makes it easier for those pathogens to gain a foothold.
Science correspondent Derek Williams there. And now we take our weekly look at how new COVID cases are developing around the world.
The numbers show new cases doubling in 35 nations and increasing in another 91 countries. They've stayed the same in 7 countries. 58 nations have seen their new positive COVID-19 cases decline, while another 13 are down by at least half. And 6 countries have reported no new cases. Here's the bar graph showing the statistics so far this year. The fight against the coronavirus will be over when that whole chart turns blue. So there's still a way to go.
But that's it for us today. For more on these and other stories related to the pandemic, do go to dw.com and click Coronavirus. I'm Stephen Beardsley in Berlin. Thanks for watching and stay safe.